Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It is Tuesday at 11:06. Hope everyone's doing good. So yeah, this coming Thursday is officially the first day of spring. So that's pretty awesome. Long, a long ass winter. Winter was okay, I guess. It's always it it literally feels like eternity. But this winter was nice, I guess. We had more snow, but it's so nice to be in the spring mode of things. So yeah, the weather's been getting really nice. We're kind of in the midst of the big mud season. So yeah, I am fixing on putting together some shows here that I'm excited about. I got some plans to. I'm trying to get the ball rolling as far as getting some interview shows set up. We'll see how all of all of those things kind of pan out. I put my feelers for a very special guest that I would love to get on the show, and we'll see how things work. And of course, I'm not going to announce anything until it's either obviously confirmed or getting really close to being confirmed. So very excited about that. I have not done any interview shows for this channel in a long time. It's probably been about 5 or 6 months. I did quite a few yesterday. Yesterday, I did quite a few last year, earlier in the year, probably like in the fall of 2024. But I did a series of where I did some interviews with some local talents here and friends that are really creative, and I'm trying to expand my interview segments. But again, it's a lot more. There's a lot more to it. So stay tuned for some hopefully there'll be some more developments in that area. Because truthfully, I enjoy doing that. I love doing just these, kind of straight up reviews where I just talk about films and things. But I really, the interview segments are the coolest thing, especially if I can get people on the show, on this channel, that, where people, the folks might be directly involved in the film, the film industry, directors and actors. And I've been fortunate enough to have some of those kinds of guests on the show. So very, very cool. So we'll see what happens. In the time being, I'm gonna keep cranking out these videos. I'm always getting some new movies. I went to Bull Moose this past weekend on Saturday and scored on some killer movies. I've talked about this label as being my favorite label of all time, and I have quite a few of their releases, and that is the one and only Mondo Macabro. They are a just I well, there's so many great boutique labels out there that specialize in all things exploitation, but Mondo Macabro is just next level. They they really have a specialty. They take a deep dive in a lot of kind of Asian cinema, a lot of Indonesian films, really obscure movies, and but they have all kinds of films to their credit when it comes to the world of exploitation. But they take a deeper dive, more I think more so than any of the other companies. Again, that being said, you have Severin, Blue Underground. I mean, there's an endless list of Synapse, of great labels that are out there. But Mondo Macabro is kind of the shit. And so I picked up. I'm at a point now where I have. I don't know the exact number offhand, but I'd say I probably have like 10 to 12 maybe at this point as far as Mondo Macabro releases. And I've discovered so many incredible films. Pretty much, yeah, I'd say every movie that I've gotten through Mondo Macabro are all movies I've never seen or even heard of. And it's gotten to the point now where I I love every release that I've gotten from them. They put out these beautiful editions of each film. They always put really great and very interesting special features included in their DVDs. They have or Blu-rays. They put out Blu-rays. They've been changing. They've been beefing up their 4K releases, and I think I was on their website the other day, and it seems for all intents and purposes, they are doing really really well. They're selling out of a lot of these releases, and they seem like they're more successful now than they've been, and which is amazing. And it to me it blows me away that there are so many freaks out there that love this shit, and including myself. And and again, the biggest thing for me with Mondo Macabro is they specialize, just like their motto says, the wild world of cinema. They specialize in the most bizarro, outrageous movies that you can imagine. And they also, like I said, all of these other labels are great and fantastic, but I feel like they take the deepest dive in the murky depths of exploitation. And I'm at a point now where if I come across, had it's actually been a while since I bought any new Mondo Macabro. I never order movies online. I think the only two movies I've ever ordered online, just in general, as far as exploitation movies, I got when I started really getting into buying and collecting a lot of these exploitation movies, which was about 4 or 5 years ago. As far as Blu-ray releases, I remember ordering films like Blood Feast by Herschel Gordon Lewis. I ordered Maniac by Bill Luswig. There's maybe one or two other films that I ordered online, but generally I love the hunt and the chase of going to a shop and finding them and just discovering the shit and just being like mesmerized by the artwork, the whole experience. But as a massive fan, and Mondo Macabro is my favorite label. As a massive fan, when I'm in the shop now, if I'm in the shop, and again, I had not bought any Mondo Macabro in quite some time. In my travels, buying movies, I just hadn't come across many, but I have quite a few. But when I was up at Bull Moose this past weekend, I went to the one in Bangor, which I think is probably one of the best ones. It's really good as far as locally. Outside of that, Portland, I discovered an amazing location of Bull Moose, which I didn't know even existed in Lewiston, of all places. That was really awesome. But I'm at a point now, if I come across anything that has a Mondo Macabro label, I will pick it up. And I won't even really look at what the movie is. Like, that's how confident I am in their, just incredible quality. And I picked up this movie that I was just totally floored by. I just watched it a couple of nights ago, and that is The Killer Is Not Alone. Never heard of this film before, and I was just completely blown away by this movie. It's absolutely incredible. It's got this I don't know. It's like a psycho. Well, it's a serial killer film, first and foremost, and it's a Spanish film. It came out in 1973. It was directed. Pardon my Spanish. It's a Spanish movie, like I said. Jesus Garcia de Dunes. It came out in '73. It's a Spanish film with English subtitles. And my God, this movie is amazing. It's essentially a serial killer movie, but it has a lot of giallo influences. It has a very Italian feel. Giallo, of course, being one of the greatest kind of subgenres of exploitation for me. And I've talked a lot about giallo films and what that you know what that term kind of means, and I've gotten quite a few giallo films in the last 3 to 4 years. Giallo is such a unique style because it's an Italian style of filmmaking, and it really flourished, in the '60s, '70s, and '80s. You had Lucio Fulci and Sergio Martino, so many great directors that were Jess Franco, that were really cranking out all of these, amazing giallo films. And basically, the giallo film is kind of like the Italian version of like the classic kind of Agatha Christie story or structure. It's essentially a murder mystery film. And this movie, The Killer Is Not Alone, is definitely very giallo inspired, and it's a slasher movie, I would say, and it's a serial killer film. And man, this movie is just uh, outrageous. It's totally haunting. It's a very there's there's moments of where just this there's a lot of strange kind of juxtaposition of where things that are happening that you're seeing that are just horrific, but yet the music is, I don't know, kind of upbeat or uplifting. So there's like all of these interesting paradoxal emotional things that this movie kind of creates. It's very offsetting and it's very disorienting when it happens, and it's so effective because you'll essentially be seeing something pretty horrific, but yet the music or the tone of the movie is very, kind of upbeat, or I don't know. It just has this bright kind of color to it, and yet it is incredibly horrific and intense and strange and surreal. The film is basically like, we know from the beginning on who the killer is, and he is basically on this rampage and he's killing these women. It starts off with him killing this prostitute, and so we know right away who the killer is, but the story kind of follows him in his kind of everyday existence, and he's a very he's got these very eccentric habits, but it follows him throughout his life, through his daily kind of basically what he does as a regular person. And it's just such an interesting look at this crazed killer, and his method of killing is he uses this piano wire to strangle and kill these women. And but man, this movie is just gorgeous. It's gorgeous. It's horrific. It's kind of terrifying. It's and the cinematography for this movie is, just amazing. There's a really awesome special features section on here too. There's an interview with a kind of a Spanish film historian who is incredibly knowledgeable about all things exploitation, and especially in the from all of these films that came out in Spain. There was, during the '60s and '70s, just a massive explosion of all of these Spanish films that were coming out, and my God, this movie is just amazing. Again, I saw this in the store at Bull Moose, did not know anything about it, but it had the Mondo Macabro label on it, and I was just like, yes, I am getting this. And first time I watched it was the other night. Didn't know anything about this movie, and it's just awesome. And the thing that's so wild about this movie is just kind of that juxtaposition, the way they use music and the way they kind of create this mood, even though there are these horrific things happening. and its use of the camera for the just amazing cinematography. It's got a really awesome ending. And as horrible and as monstrous as the killer is in this film, you do kind of have some empathy towards him, which is, you kind of feel strange for feeling that way, or at least I did, or do, because of how much of a monster he is. And it's got that, again, it's definitely giallo inspired. It's got this whole kind of crime, murder, mystery kind of vibe to it. There is these police that are kind of hot on his tail, trying to track him down, and he's always a few steps ahead of where they are as far as their investigation. And there's a lot of tension. It's great, and they did such a great job because with this film, because you know right away who the killer is, but you watch him on this kind of strange little journey that he has. And you just can't go wrong. I got with Mondo Macabro, you just can't go wrong with them, and they have such a massive release load. Like, it's crazy. I was on their website the other day, and again, I don't really order things online. I like to do things on person, but if I need to, and depending on how things go with this kind of crazy world that we live in, from my perspective, I see that as far as these really obscure movies, not just Mondo Macabro, but just in general, Severin and all of these other companies, these boutique labels. From my perspective, as far as being a guy who buys physical media, I've seen it really grow over the last 3 to 5 years, big time, and I would say it's an arguable thing that I'd almost say now it's from what I see just from going to the shops and the amount of new YouTube channels that I've seen within the last few months, when it comes to exploitation. I think it's growing. I think it's gotten even bigger. When I've always loved these films, but it was probably about 5 years ago when I really got heavily into buying them. It was during COVID. And so that was when I really started, I made a big switch I was late to the game with Blu-rays. I eventually got into them, and now I'm hooked. But during that time, I was, really wanting to take a deep dive into the exploitation world because I've always loved it. There's always been, I have so many great connections to so many of these movies, like since I was a kid when I got into, horror cinema, or the genre of horror, slasher films in particular. But I really revved it up as far as buying things and taking chances. And the first couple of years, again, it was like 4 or 5 years ago. The first couple of years, it felt like this, just like an explosion, like a bomb going off. Like there was so much stuff, so many titles coming out, and so many, things I was discovering, and then also, buying things that I saw that I loved as a kid. Tourist Trap, and you know, some just incredible Lucio Fulci films, and just the list is endless. But out of that, I discovered all these other films and all of these other directors. Herschel Gordon Lewis, and just the list is endless. And it was probably a few years of doing that, and then I think it was probably about a year ago or so, or maybe more, maybe 2 years ago now. It's all kind of a fucking blur, but I'd say within the last, I'd say a year or two ago, when it was announced, especially around when it was announced that Best Buy, it's some of the big companies that sold movies, like the more corporate companies like Best Buy, and other things like that. Well, the main time that I saw there was a big shift was when Best Buy came out and said that they were basically chopping off, getting rid of all of their physical media. And for me, when I back even way before I got into Blu-rays, I used to go to Best Buy before I even really discovered, Bull Moose, and this is going back, many, many years. When I first started getting into collecting DVDs, I would go to Best Buy, and that would be the place that I would buy movies. And they, back in the day, they had just, an amazing selection of movies. And that's kind of, where I really started getting into buying DVDs and, and becoming a collector of movies. And again, fast forward quite a few years after that, I got into Bull Moose, and, the rest is, I guess, history. But I noticed that there was this seismic shift when that was announced that they were doing away with physical media, and then they even went as far as saying that you couldn't order any physical, you know, media through their website. They were just going to continue working on distributing, TVs, streaming, or not streaming platforms, but like basically selling TVs, like pure electronics for home use, gaming, all kinds of games and things like that. That was what they were going to repurpose their whole thing on. And when that was announced that they were doing it, it was kind of this crazy thing because it felt like, whoa, is this going to be the death of physical media? Is this going to go away? Will our Blu-rays, extinct? They're going to be extinct now. Blu-ray players and 4K and all that shit. So it was very, very seismic. And I remember around that time when that happened and when that was announced, there were a few other shops and stores that I think were starting to kind of do that also. But I saw in my habits of going to Bull Moose, I saw how it was affecting even Bull Moose at that time because I saw that there were less and less titles available even at Bull Moose, especially when it comes to movies like this, the real obscure deep cuts of exploitation horror films. These were disappearing. I didn't see them as much in some of my favorite shops to go. And then they were the sections. Some of the sections were getting smaller, and where they were selling DVDs and Blu-rays, and they were just kind of the titles that they had were the more kind of Hollywood-based films, and I was just like, holy shit, this could be it. And then within the past year, in my travels and my habits, I started seeing some more of these kinds of films appearing, more and more exploitation films showing up again. And then just within the last few months, I saw that there was this huge explosion of many more titles in especially in the exploitation world available in a lot of these shops. And also, I mean, typically when I would go, or when I go to Bull Moose, if you go to, for me, for instance, I'll go in, and I'll go straight to the horror Blu-ray selection, and each shop in Bull Moose is different. Some stores are obviously bigger than others, and part of the fun was you would just go to, I would go to the section that I wanted to go to, and you just sift through it. And they have, all of the things under the horror kind of banner all kind of mixed in. Like they'll have, like more commercial films, like by James Wan, like The Conjuring, or or what have you, or Ari Aster films, Robert Eggers films. they'll have everything all mixed in. But then if you look a little deeper, you'll find the exploitation movies and the more obscure shit, and Mondo Macabro and stuff, and Severin and Blue Underground. But suddenly, what I noticed in the past 6 months is now these exploitation movies, for the most part, have their own section, and they're kind of even labeled differently, where they actually have the section called the boutique label section, which is now a separate thing, and now it's just these kinds of films. And I was just like, whoa, what the fuck? I was really surprised. And so, on one hand, it made it quicker. It was a quicker and easier search to find these kinds of films, and because they have now, it kind of arrived to this place of where these movies have their own, independent section now, which didn't happen before. And since then, I've noticed that just more and more shit is coming out, and so it's wild, It's but this movie, The Killer Is Not Alone, is fucking badass, so good. Definitely see this movie. It's definitely one of the best kind of serial killer films I've seen. It's definitely a psychosexual thriller, a giallo-inspired exploitation movie. It's super low budget. It's just so badass. And again, I'm gonna do a show pretty soon here on Mondo Macabro. I'm gonna just talk about them as the label. I haven't really done any shows on the boutique labels like themselves, as each company, and that's something I kind of want to do. And especially, I think the kickoff for some of those kinds of series, or that series, will be definitely Mondo Macabro, which is my favorite label. So for me, again, it's a thing of I'm at a point now where anything I see with a Mondo Macabro label, I'm gonna buy it. So they fucking rule. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.